Talk about some of the challenges that you faced while you were climbing the corporate ladder.
Well, it's a funny thing. Of course, I come out of the generation that I was just at the tail end of the civil rights movement and probably the tail end of the women's rights movement as well. There were very few Asians in this country when I was growing up. For example, the Chinese were emigrating to the United States at the rate of 105 a year. 105 a year. And there's, in New York City now, there are over 1 million Asians. And people have always asked me that whether I found a barrier to positions because I was a woman or because I was Asian. And I have to say that I felt like neither happened. And I don't know whether that's because of the particular sectors I was in, where that didn't matter as much. So, for example, at one point I worked for a publishing company, and you really just had to know your stuff. People didn't see me. I was in the background, and I did my work, and I did it competently. And the issue of both my ethnicity and my gender never came up. Later on, I realized that there were factors that I had to overcome. For example, you walk into court with a client who's a man, and if he happens to be Caucasian, the immediate assumption is I'm the paralegal or the secretary there to take notes. So you had to establish yourself that way. I would say that youth was more of an obstacle. You would walk into a room and that somebody would say, the intern's here, when is the attorney going to be here, for example. So those were things that happened. I remember working for an attorney with other young lawyers, and I couldn't bring myself to call him by his first name. I had been brought up to call people Mr. when they're older. And in our cultures, we call elders uncle, for example. And so I kept calling him Mr. And at some point, an older secretary pulled me in and said, Joyce, start calling him by his first name unless you want to get his coffee. And then I realized, the rules that I grew up with don't apply in this environment, and I have to learn the rules.